What's up, guys? So I got the old chassis rolled up over here alongside the new frame. So you can see kind of right out of the gate the height of the spring hangers here versus your two-wheel drive. They're a lot shorter. You can also see the the distance between the frame and the actual spring pocket there. Versus the 1-ton stuff is a lot tighter to the frame. And then so here's your shock mounts I was talking about, how they're on the outside of the frame on the 1/2 and 3/4 inside on the frame on the 1-ton, and then opposite stagger. And you can see so these are 52 springs, and you can see the massive, ridiculous lift blocks. So those definitely gotta go. So here's your 14-bolt full float that I must have got it out of a 3/4 ton. It had to have come from an early 3/4 ton. I think it was sometime in the early 80s. The 3/4 tons, they started using that semi-float 14-bolt, where in the 70s they were still using this 10.5 full float for 3/4 tons. So it must have been a 3/4 because I didn't move the spring perches on this. So this is your typical, disc brake swap. For these, it just uses a 3/4 ton front caliper and front rotor. Some of them come with weld-on brackets, caliper brackets. This kit actually just bolts up to the original flange that's on the axle that's made for the backing plate. So it's a pretty slick setup. The only thing that sucks is you lose your parking brakes. So some guys go to these these early Cadillac calipers that have a integrated parking brake in the caliper. It sounds good and everything, but I'm told that they're kind of finicky and they really don't work all that well. They're not that reliable, the guys that have run them. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to look into something else if I want to do a parking brake, like maybe an actual Driveline brake or something. The shocks all the way around on this thing were not very old. So I'm just going to move them right over. Those are Skyjacker Nitro twin tubes. So here's the SM465 and 205 that I was running. Yeah, like I said, not going to be running this setup again. I already got a friend that actually wants this whole setup for another project. So I had found 1410 yokes all the way around for got 1410 yoke for that, the 14 bolt there, and the The rear output on a GM 205 is 32 spline, same as most of them. So that 1410 yoke wasn't hard to find, and I'm probably going to move this yoke over to the new 32 spline input 205. Dottie, come here. Good girl. It's the front output that is unique on the GM 205. It's 30 spline. The front output on a Ford 205 is 32. I can't remember on the Dodge what the Dodge is. They might even be smaller, maybe like a 27 or 29 or something. I can't remember, but GM is unique, the front output. So it was kind of hard to find this 1410 yoke. I believe there was only one manufacturer, one company that sold that yoke, and it was kind of expensive. And then, you know, there's 1410 yoke for the Dana 60. So I'm not gonna run this drive shaft up here is extremely strong, and it worked really, really well. But I deleted these come with a flange yoke from the factory, and then they use a Saginaw type CV front drive shaft that they can't handle a lot of misalignment at all. So I went to this where I just put a U-joint yoke right on the transfer case, and just to delete that whole thing and just go to a 2-joint shaft. And it worked, like I said, it worked very well for strict off-road use only. But if you wanted to drive the truck down the road in 4-wheel drive, you really couldn't do it with the angles that are on this shaft. It's just too steep of an angle. So it would vibrate pretty bad. You get past 40, 45 mile an hour, the thing would start to shake like crazy. So I do want to be able to run 4-wheel drive going down the road. So I'm going to kind of get rid of this whole setup and go to, I'll put a flange type yoke back on the front of the new transfer case, and basically go to a Super Duty, Ford Super Duty front shaft, because it uses a CV, but it's a 1350 series CV, double cardan. And then at that end, you know, it's going to have to be a custom length anyway. At that end, I'll probably keep that 1410 yoke and keep the 1410 slip yoke on the end of the drive shaft, but just go back to a CV that with a, you know, bigger U joints that can handle a little more misalignment. So you can see in here on the back of this is like a kit that you can buy for a 205. It's a plate that bolts on there, and it comes with a little bushing, and then you in turn just kind of weld your bushing to whatever. It's kind of so you can add a second cross member like this, like I did. I might take that all off and try to reuse it on the next 205. It's not as necessary, because this, they call this the figure 8 pattern 205 that they used on these. These extension housings in between the tranny and the transfer case, this is the third one of those I put on this setup. I kept snapping them, I kept breaking them. It's a really heavy transfer case, and it hanging off of that extension housing, it ends up snapping the housings. I almost lost the transfer case the one time, and almost completely broke off. GM uses a kind of a it's like a tie bar. There's some kind of support bar that comes off of this and actually goes all the way up to the bell housing bolts to help support the weight of this transfer case. When you go to the setup I'm going to with the round front pattern, 32 spline input, just male to female, male shaft coming out of the 4L80 or Turbo 400, and then just female on the transfer case. They don't have as much of a problem supporting the transfer case as this setup. This is a male input and then a male output, and there's actually a collar, a female sleeve collar in between there. And I believe it's 10 spline. It's coarse spline. So the whole thing is kind of a really goofy setup, and it makes it so this transfer case really doesn't interchange with anything else at all. There's aftermarket adapters to use this behind whatever the hell you want, but in terms of interchangeability with other GM or other transmissions, there really isn't any. So just going to be getting rid of this entire setup and just keeping it intact. So these are the body mount perches that they got to get moved over, because like I said, they got removed from that frame. They were probably in rough shape. These are your little brackets for your shock mounts. Those got to get moved over and the holes drilled. So here's the front spring hanger / body mount, and you can see it's all kind of incorporated into one piece here, versus just a cab mount only on the two-wheel drives. So you would hope that the holes for all the rivets and everything were all in the same spot, and you could just move it over and just bolt it back up, but unfortunately it does not appear to be the case. Maybe a couple of them, but not all of them. So it'll just kind of be mocking it up and drilling a couple new holes, but just gotta make sure you get your location down right. So this front cross member piece, like I was saying, is angled it's kind of straight up and down, where that thing is angled way rearward. I don't know if it's because down in here they incorporate the sway bar pivot mounts are attached to the bottom of this setup on the four-wheel drives. So like I said, I might move this over there, or do keep that one, and just the only reason I was hoping to be able to move this over is, like I was saying, is this is an aftermarket steering box brace kit that comes up and bolts here, and then comes with another little support tab there. So it would be nice to just move this whole thing over so I can keep my brace. It's got a ORD crossover steering setup on this, which was by far the absolute best modification I ever did to this truck. If you're deliberating on going to crossover steering, just do it. You will be absolutely astounded how well your truck goes down the road. So we're just gonna move all of this stuff over, and I don't know, the steering box might be got a little seep to it, but whatever. But yeah, the crossover steering setup actually uses a two-wheel drive steering box. So I'm just gonna unbolt this and just move everything right over to the new frame. The The lift springs up here, like I said, they ride really good, so they're getting moved right over without doing anything to them. So this is another ORD kit here. So the factory shackles here are very thin and they're very prone to breaking if you're doing like off-roading. I went through 3 or 4 of these. You know, it was just whatever one. You would just snap one here and there, and then you know, you almost wouldn't even notice it right away. You'd just still be driving the truck for a while with one of these things broke. But so this kit from ORD, they give you way thicker shackles, and they're, you know, greasable urethane bushings, but they also replace the entire whoop, got away from me again there, sorry. It replaces this whole unit in here. So that's the other problem with this setup from the factory. The bushing that is used in here is really small. It's kind of undersized. You know, again, it's probably fine for you know, driving on the road, but you do any kind of off-roading, it just will wear that bushing out extremely fast. They also use really small bolts, top and bottom. They use like I think it might be a 7/16 bolt. It's kind of undersized bolts too, so this upgrades the size of the bolts and everything. It's a really nice kit. So I'm glad I did all this stuff a long time ago, because it's just going to make it easier. It's going to transfer all this stuff over. You know, everything is all bolted in, so it should be pretty simple. The only thing I might have to modify just a little bit is the bottom lip on the frame here. It seems like the 1-ton frame over there is maybe a little wider, so I may have to just kind of notch it in a little bit around where this inside shackle, so it doesn't hit the frame. It's really close on this frame, so here's the engine mount cross member that I was talking about in the last video, that I do not think is gonna just move over to that frame. It might, I don't know. It just doesn't look like it's gonna fit in the frame. So I don't know if I can. So you can see right here, there's one spot where it's broke. I can't tell right offhand. I don't know where any other spots where it's broke, but I knew I'd looked to kind of really inspected this thing really close, and I think I'd found a few other cracks too. So, you know, it's not like it couldn't be welded up, repaired, and even beefed up, you know, gusseted, and so I'm still gonna remove it out of here and then see if I can get it in there without too much modifications, and you know, and if I can, then I'll just reinforce it and beef it up and make it so it doesn't crack again. The front axle is pretty well ready to rock, man. The front, I guess the front and the rear, they were, I pretty much completely went through all these things. So they can just move right over and maybe, you know, get painted in between or something to make them look nice. But these things are totally gone through all new seals and new bearings, and it upgraded the locking spindle nuts on them. The factory spindle nut setup is really goofy, and it's kind of prone to loosening up. The knuckles on a GM Dana 60 and maybe even a Dodge one, they're very prone to breaking right around here. The knuckle will snap right clean all the way around the other side, and they'll break right in half. So you can't even really tell by looking at this. But I actually had bought this weld-on reinforcement kit, I guess is what you'd call it. It comes with a whole bunch of random assorted plates, and you just kind of weld them all onto the knuckle to keep it from breaking. The Ford knuckles, for one reason or another, didn't have this issue. Or at least it wasn't as bad as the GM ones. It seems like the GM ones had the issue more than any of them. So that was one kind of modification I did to this thing. And then this was a dual wheel axle. And these are not actually single wheel hubs. I actually put the hubs in a brake lathe and turned them all the way down, cut the flange, this outer flange. The wheel mounting flange was way out here on the dual wheel hub, and you can actually machine all of it off and basically go back to there's a second flange back here that they attach the rotor to, and then you can in turn use that as your wheel mounting flange. You just have to turn it all the way back to that flange, and then you got to turn the face of this flange to make it flat, and then you got to drill the holes out. They're threaded holes. They're meant to just accept bolts through the back of the rotor and into the hub. So you just drill the holes out to the size needed to press wheel studs in them. So I'm sure some of you maybe are familiar with that, because the price of single wheel hubs are very they're expensive. You know, they're $500-600 for a pair of them, and I did not want to pay for it at the time. So okay, so this brake master cylinder, as I had gone to rear disc. This is GM during the 90s had what was called a 3500 HD pickup. They were basically a kind of a medium duty truck. They would have a big 5-lug wheel pattern on the front and a 10-lug axle in the rear. Very heavy duty truck. Not independent front suspension like all the 80s or 90s trucks. Even the 1-ton dualies were independent front suspension. The 3500 HD was only available in 2-wheel drive, and it had basically a straight beam front axle with leaf springs. So at the very end of that run, they made 3500 HDs up to 2000 or 2001, right around there. And the last year or two of that pickup, GM put disc brakes in the back of them versus the really, really big drums that they had for most of the 90s. So when they went to discs in those last few years, 99, 2000, 2001 or so, this was the master cylinder that they used. And it interchanges with a square body master cylinder, bolts right up. The only thing that you have to do is use your square body reservoir the 3500 HD reservoir is freaking massive, man. That thing holds like a gallon of brake fluid. It's like this tall. It'll actually hit the hood on the truck. So that's the only thing I had to do, and this reservoir pops right in. And this master cylinder is huge. The bore, the internal bore of this thing is gigantic. I still had vacuum boost on this truck when I did this whole thing, and the brakes worked fantastic with the big 1-ton calipers in the front and the disc brake in the back with this big master cylinder. So yeah, a little snippet of information. If you guys are doing the same thing, that's a really good option for a master cylinder if you're doing a disc brake swap. So yeah, that's about it. Showing you everything I gotta do. So I'm gonna go ahead and quit yammering, get to work. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.